That's an amazing fight. Who you picking that one?
I think Ilia smokes him, bro.
He smokes?
think he
No,
smokes
I
him.
don't think so, bro.
It's a very bad
I
matchup.
think
for
he's a
Charles.
way closer fight than you think.
The
Why?
odds makers have Ilia as.
Who is the odds maker, bro? Tell me your name. Who are these guys? Odds maker. Who's these guys, bro?
Gilbert Burns has just shared his shocking insights on the upcoming clash between Ilia Topuria versus Charles Olivera. However, Gilbert Burns also discussed Charles Oliveira's weaknesses, pointing out areas where he believes Olivera could struggle in certain matchups. He highlighted how Oliveira's style, which often relies on aggressive striking and grappling exchanges, can sometimes leave him open in close-range situations. Burns noted that Olivera can be vulnerable in the clinch, especially against fighters who throw sharp elbows and knees. He also expressed concern that Oliveira's upright posture and tendency to engage in wild exchanges might expose him to powerful counter hooks. Burns, a high-level grappler with solid striking, understands the risks in those exchanges and emphasized how important it is to stay defensively sound, especially when facing fighters who can capitalize on those small openings.
Let me ask you this though.
Yeah.
What's Charles Oliveira's weakness?
Charles Oliveira weakness.
Additionally, Gilbert Burns spoke about the potential matchup involving Charles Olivera, explaining that it's a tough situation for him because he's close to both fighters. He didn't want to pick a side. He made it clear that the fight is much closer than many fans believe. Burns emphasized that while people might see a clear favorite, both fighters bring high-level skills and unique challenges that could make the bout very competitive. From his perspective, it's not a one-sided fight. It's a high-level clash where small moments could decide the outcome.
So you're picking Charles.
He's a close fight than people think. Both are my guys, you know, so it's kind of suck for me to pick a side, but I'm just saying that he's way closer fight than people think.
On the other hand, Mateusz Gamrot shared his prediction for the upcoming UFC 317 clash between Charles Olivera and Ilia Topuria, backing Olivera to secure a knockout win. While he recognized Topuria's knockout power and the danger he brings if he lands clean, Gamrot believes the size difference and Oliveira's overall experience will be the deciding factors. In his view, Oliveira's striking skills, reach, and time spent competing at a high level in the lightweight division give him a clear edge. He sees the former champ as too seasoned and too versatile for a featherweight making the jump up, and expects Olivera to finish the fight before the final bell.
Fair enough. Who do you think wins, Ilia or Charles?
Interesting matchup. The both guys has changed. Like if Ilia hit Charles Oliveira head, so he can knock him down for sure. But I think Oliveira is so big for him and for all-rounder fighter, and I think Oliveira will win this fight.
Furthermore, Mateusz Gamrot added that the fight between Charles Oliveira and Ilia Topuria is a thrilling matchup that could go either way, but he slightly favors Oliveira. He admitted that Topuria has the kind of power that could end the fight with one clean shot, but emphasized Oliveira's size, experience, and grappling as key advantages. Gamrot mentioned that if the fight hits the mat, Oliveira's submission skills and control could create serious trouble for Topuria. Despite recognizing that Oliveira can be unpredictable at times, he believes the Brazilian's ground game could be the deciding factor in such a closely matched contest.
Wow, you think Oliveira's gonna win? I haven't heard a lot of people say that.
I think so. He's big. It depends how his performance will be in the fight, because sometimes he looks bad, but sometimes he looks fantastic. So I think that in the ground he will be much better for Ilia, especially like the gabarit is much different. Oliveira is big guy, Ilia is small guy. So if Oliveira catch him in the ground, I think this is gonna be big problem. But like I say, Ilia can knock him out for him also, you know. So this is like 50-50. But I think Oliveira will win.
Moreover, Renato Moicano shared his thoughts on the upcoming fight between Ilia Topuria and Charles Oliveira, saying it's a much closer matchup than many believe. While some expect Topuria to have an easy time, Moicano disagrees, pointing out that Oliveira is incredibly durable and dangerous. He also noted that Topuria moving up from featherweight will make things more challenging for both fighters. Initially leaning toward Topuria, Moicano admitted that after speaking with Charles during a podcast on his Brazilian Brazilian channel, he felt a stronger connection to him. In the end, he's backing Olivera not just for his skills, but also out of pride in supporting a fellow Brazilian.
You're fighting on the Charles Olivera versus Ilia Topuria card. Charles is a big underdog. How do you see that fight going?
Man, that's a tougher matchup that a lot of people think. They think Topuria gonna run through Charles. You never count Charles Oliveira out. I think he's very tough. But Topuria is good, you know? He's 145. It's going to be a tough fight for both fighters. I don't have one opinion on that. I was leaning more to Topuria, but today I just had a podcast with Charles on my Brazilian channel. It's just very hard to not like the guy. That makes harder, you know, to pick against him. So I'm going with Charles just because he's Brazilian.
Meanwhile, Gilbert Burns called it an amazing fight and asked who his co-host was picking, but Matty Betts confidently replied that Ilia Topuria would smoke Charles Oliveira. He showed no hesitation in backing Topuria to dominate the matchup. Gilbert quickly pushed back on that take, saying he didn't think it would be so one-sided, showing more respect for Oliveira's chances.
That's an amazing fight. Who you picking that one?
I think Ilia smokes him, bro.
He smokes?
I think he smokes him.
I don't think so, bro.
During the conversation, Gilbert Burns argued that the fight between Ilia Topuria and Charles Oliveira is much closer than people realize. When Matty Betts pointed out that the odds makers have Ilia as the clear favorite, Gilbert pushed back, questioning who these odds makers even are. He joked about them being mysterious figures in the shadows behind the counter, and criticized how often they get things wrong. Matty acknowledged that while odds makers do make mistakes, they also get a lot of things right, adding balance to the exchange.
I think that it's a very bad matchup.
I think he's a way closer fight than you think. Why?
The odds makers have Ilia as...
Who is the odds maker, bro? Tell me your name. Who are these guys? Odds maker. Who's these guys, bro? Who's these guys?
These guys are the shadows behind the counter.
Guys made so many mistakes.
Of course they make mistakes, but like
so
they're also right a lot too.
Moreover, UFC legend Chael Sonnen expressed surprise upon hearing that Ilia Topuria is the betting favorite in his lightweight debut against former champion Charles Oliveira. Sonnen found it hard to believe that a fighter as accomplished as Oliveira, who not only held the lightweight title but also defended it multiple times and owns the record for most submissions in UFC history, would be seen as such a significant underdog. He stressed that Oliveira's legacy and credentials should earn him far more respect in a matchup like this.
Minus 370 favorite Topuria is to beat Charles Do Bronx Oliveira.
What?
Minus 370.
That is insane. That is not right.
To be the world champion that defended 3 times, has more submissions than anyone in UFC history, and he's a minus 370 favorite.
However, Khamzat Chimaev praised Ilia Topuria for his rise in the UFC and reflected on their early days training together at All Stars Gym. Back then, before Topuria became a well-known name, Chimaev already saw his potential. Both were competing at a high level in Brave FC, and Chimaev remembered how focused and driven Ilia was, even in those early stages. He said it was clear that Topuria had the mindset and skill to go far. Now, seeing how close Topuria is to achieving it all, Chimaev sees it as a natural result of that early dedication.
Очень известный сейчас боец. Ты с ним вроде как давно знаком. Он тренировался в Альстаре вместе, вот до еще его всей известности. Когда вот тренировки ты его видел, ты видел этот потенциал в будущем?
Ну, конечно, ну просто тогда, в то время, этот был он хорошим топовым бойцом в Брейве, как и я, мы оба там выступали. Видно было, потому что он такой пахарь и хочет добиться чего-то в своей жизни. И парень добился всех высот, которые можно в этом спорте добиться.
At last, Burns added that for Ilia, fighting Charles is clearly a better stylistic matchup than facing Islam. He brought up how Charles was apparently dealing with injuries before the first Makhachev fight and felt pressured into taking it anyway in Abu Dhabi. That's why he still wants to see a rematch with a fully healthy Oliveira. He pointed out how different the two opponents are, Islam being a dominant grappler, while Ilia brings sharp boxing and some grappling, but lacks kicks and poses a very different threat overall.
It's a better matchup for Ilia than Islam, obviously.
For Charles?
No, I'm saying like Ilia, like obviously Ilia fighting Charles is a better matchup for him than than Islam.
I heard so many things that Charlie was very hurt on that first fight, but he had to take the fight in Abu Dhabi. He tried to pull out the UFC, kind of pressure him to get the fight. I gotta see that rematch. You know, for me, I gotta see. Let's see, this guy 100% what he's gonna do against Islam, but it's a very different matchup. One guy's a boxer, the other one is a high level grappler. But so is Topuria is still a good grappler, but no kicks, no. It's different, very different matchup.
Meanwhile, Paddy Pimblett gave his take on the UFC 317 matchup, saying he sees Ilia Topuria with a real shot at beating Charles Olivera. He acknowledged Oliveira's toughness, but questioned how well his chin can hold up after nearly 40 fights and a lot of wear and tear. Pimblett also pointed out that Charles tends to take big risks, which could backfire against someone like Ilia. He also said the jump from featherweight to lightweight, saying fans often underestimate how much of a difference that makes. Since Olivera has a similar frame to his own, Paddy believes the size factor could be a big deal, especially in a striking-heavy fight.
Ilia beats Charles then?
I think he might, to be honest. Charles is a bit chinny, isn't he? You know what I mean? He's had about 40 fights or something. He always gets punched. He always gets cracked.
Yeah. So, he's reckless, but he's super exciting.
Yeah, he is.
And he's dangerous.
Exciting. If he gets him down, I can see him winning, because that £10 difference is a big difference.
Yeah.
145 to 155, it's a big difference. People don't understand that because they don't watch the sport or they're not involved in the sport. But that £10 makes a big difference. And especially, like, Charles is like my height. Ilia's like down here when I stand up. Know what I mean? So it's gonna make a big difference.
Additionally, Pimblett also pointed out that Ilia Topuria might be surprised by how big Charles Oliveira looks in person. He explained that when fighters move up from smaller divisions, they often don't fully grasp the size and strength difference until they're face to face with someone from the higher weight class. He used examples like Bobby Green and Michael Chandler guys who seem more physically imposing on paper than they actually felt in the cage. That kind of unexpected size difference, Paddy suggested, could play a role when Ilia squares off with Charles.
Ilia might get a bit of a fright at how big Charles is when he stands opposite him. Fighters do that with me, who fight at lightweight. Know what I mean? I'll never forget Bobby Green looking over at me and being like, what, he's big him. Same with Chandler. Like people thought Chandler was going to be bigger than me, and he just weren't.
However, Michael Bisping analyzed the possible matchup between Ilia Topuria and Charles Oliveira, calling Oliveira a relentless and dangerous opponent who's always pressing forward with strikes and hunting for submissions. At the same time, Bisping noted that this would be Topuria's debut at lightweight, which adds a layer of uncertainty. He praised Ilia's sharp hands, heavy pressure, and solid Greco-Roman wrestling, and said that given those tools, it wouldn't shock him if Topuria pulled off the win.
Ilia versus Charles Du Bronx Oliveira. We know Charles, he's a dangerous, aggressive son of a bitch. Gonna walk forward, punches, knees, elbows, he'll lock on a submission. Ilia, this is his first fight at lightweight, and with the punching power of Ilia Topuria, the boxing that he has, the footwork that he has, and the Greco-Roman wrestling, it wouldn't surprise me if Ilia pulls it off.
At last, Michael Bisping spoke highly of Ilia Topuria's rise, pointing to his confidence and how he's backed it up with dominant performances. He highlighted how Topuria has a habit of finishing fights clean and staying out of danger, often being the one dishing out damage rather than absorbing it. Bisping sees a win over Charles Oliveira as a huge step forward for Ilia and mentioned that it wouldn't be surprising if Topuria enters the fight as the favorite, given how consistent and dangerous he's looked so far.
I would say Ilia Topuria, given everything that he's done in the sport, the confidence that he's shown, the manifestation, as the kids say, but bringing it all to a reality, knocking out everyone in his way, doing it in absolute style, hardly breaking a sweat, not having to fight through any adversity, not being the hammer and the nail. He's just been the hammer, just hammering his way through everyone. If he beats Charles Oliveira, which I would assume that he's going to be the favorite to do, and that's with absolutely no disrespect towards Charles Oliveira.
Furthermore, Javier Mendez added that he leans toward Ilia Topuria in a matchup with Charles Oliveira because of Topuria's sharp boxing in close range and his ability to land clean, powerful shots. He pointed out that Oliveira's upright posture could leave him open, especially if he can't time his knees or front kicks well enough to keep Topuria at bay. Although Oliveira has the reach and danger kicks, Mendez feels Topuria brings a more complete skill set and has the better chance of winning.
You would pick Ilia over Charles. What is it about his skill set that you like more?
It's basically because Charles is going to stand in there upright, like you're saying, and when he gets inside, he's going to use that boxing, and Charles' head's going to be up, and Ilia's got a really good way of connecting with that chin on the inside. Really, really nice, just like what he did with Volk. You know, and I think if Charles doesn't get him up the middle with knees or front kicks up the middle, he's going to have a hard time with his boxing against him, and he's going to have a hell of a time trying to take him down. So it's going to be one of those where Ilia's got more opportunities than Charles does. But Charles can surprise us with his length, you know, and up the middle would be really, really well suited for him. And the kicks too, you know, body, head type thing, you know, low, high, you know, he could do really well with that.
Moreover, Robert Whittaker commented on how exciting the lightweight division has become, especially with Ilia Topuria stepping in. He mentioned that Topuria was reportedly promised a title shot by the UFC if he gave up his featherweight belt. Whittaker said champions moving up in weight should be allowed to face top-tier opponents right away, but also admitted it can be tough for fighters who've battled through the ranks. In the end, he believes the UFC will go with the matchup that brings in the most money.
I think the lightweight division is the most exciting division right now. It's just death row in the lightweight division at the moment. Like the top 5, dude, that guard up there right now, it's just killers, man.
But especially with Ilia Topuria entering the mix, right? The whole big story over the past week was he obviously vacated the title at featherweight, but apparently he said the UFC told him, we promise you a title opportunity if you vacate. That's what he told Spanish media. Or I think he said as a backup he would fight Charles Oliveira. And now they've gone back and forth. What do you reckon, Rob?
I don't know what was promised or anything, but I feel like if you're in a lower division and you vacate the title, you should go straight to the top of the pecking order. I'd like to see him go straight into a title shot. Okay. Understandably, it can be tricky that way because there are a lot of guys, like, styles make fights. So if the champion of a lighter division has a better style to beat the guy in the high division, where's the fairness of that? Because that guy may not get through 10 guys to get to a title shot. He may not get through the contenders. Yeah, I just feel like there should be a certain amount of weight for being the champion of the division already. I can also see the side of the argument for the guys in the division that have been like, brother, like I've had to slog, especially in the lightweight division, like I've had to slog my way to the top of this division, and it is death row there. I think UFC's going to do what makes them the most money.
MMA Guru and Demetrius Johnson both weighed in on the possible Ilia Topuria versus Charles Oliveira fight. MMA Guru called it a major pay-per-view attraction, even though no title would be at stake, and said the matchup is very exciting. He did express some doubt about how Topuria will adapt to moving up to 155 pounds. Demetrius Johnson pointed out that Topuria is naturally a big athlete, usually around 191 pounds. Johnson was surprised Topuria stayed at featherweight for so long and said moving to lightweight is a logical step. He also noted that it's always intriguing to see fighters compete in higher weight divisions.
If Ilia Topuria fights Charles Oliveira on a pay-per-view, that's a big deal.
Oh, it's going to be bigger.
They don't need to wait for an interim belt. They don't need to wait for an undisputed. So, yeah. I don't know how he's going to do it lightweight, though. Maybe you can speak on that. He's a smaller guy coming up.
It's a smaller coming up. It'll be interesting because he is bigger from when I heard him on the Joe Rogan podcast. Like 191, I think he was walking around. It's massive. So for him to cut to 145 seems almost like, how did he do that? But now that he's grown up to 155, I always like when athletes go up.
So what are your thoughts on this? What do you think about Ilia Topuria versus Charles Oliveira? We would love to hear your thoughts, so share your thoughts in the comment section and make sure to like and subscribe to the channel if you enjoyed the video.